welcome, my lovely brothers and sisters. Welcome to another live book reading. I'm still reading from the most interesting book so far, the story of Isis and the war on bloodlines. It is a book written by Wes Penry. I highly advise you to buy this book yourself and start reading it yourselves. You can go to the links in the text box. If you go to the .net website, then there is a web page dedicated to Wes Penry. And if you click on a book cover, then you will automatically be redirected to the Amazon writers page. And then you can buy the book yourself, but better is, of course, to buy the book through wespenry.com or wespenryvideos.com so that the man gets the full payment. And because if you buy something from Amazon also wants to have a percentage of the sale. All right. As the title is telling us today, we are going to dive deeper in the Merovingian long-haired kings. And whom are they? And on whose hand are they? Which bloodline are they representing? Marduks or Enkis? Let us continue. What I say, this book that I'm reading from is very interesting to read. And it also goes for the coming chapters completely into all these bloodlines. And eventually, we also get to know more information about Princess Diana and her role in the English royal court, and that Princess Diana was in actuality the reincarnation of Isis herself. What many people did not know and still probably do not know, I think, is that the royal house of England are very much Mother Goddess worshippers. I didn't know that either. I learned this during the readings of many other interesting informational resources. One of them is also Wes Penry. So let us dive into this topic and see whom are the Merovingian long-haired kings and the Dutch royal house. Because I live in the Netherlands, I have assumings that the Dutch royal house is also having a link with the Merovingian line. So let us see. The Merovingian long-haired kings. And I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for tuning in through Facebook, through Rumble, and through YouTube. You are most welcome to listen along. Thank you so much for spending your time in this way and learning something new, or maybe not so new, but getting a deeper understanding. All right, the Merovingian long-haired kings. Note in the appendix B at the end of this book, there are two links leading to the complete family trees of the French and the British royal dynasties. Respectively, it is important to follow these family trees while reading the following chapters during this book. And when I, and in this case the I stands for Wes Penry, start discussing the different kings and queens and royal houses, it may quickly feel abstract and confusing unless you have these guides. I suggest you bookmark them on your computer and pull them up as you read further along the book. I will see, and otherwise I will mention these links too in the text box, and you can find a lot also through the website britroyals.com/wessex3.asp. So go to there, and that is one of them. The other one is wikipedia.org/wiki/family tree of French monarchs. All right. I need different glasses. All right. King Merovingian of Belgium. For more than 400 years, the Priory of Sion kept the bloodline hidden until 475 AD, when the Pope put the first Merovingian king, Childeric I, on the throne of the Franks, and the Franks was a different name for France. According to mainstream history, the word Merovingian possibly comes from the supposed father of Childeric I, whose name was Merovec, also Merovi or Merovig, and dates from 411 to 458. Although historians are uncertain of Merovec's existence, it is likely he was a real person. He is known as being the father of the Merovingian dynasty and allegedly reigned in today's Belgium around 450 until his death in around 458. In very early days, Belgium was part of France. Merovec's mother raped by a sea monster. Well, whom is this sea monster? There's a very interesting story about Merovec. In those days, it was said his mother went swimming in the ocean, and one day, when she was raped by a quinotaur, which is a fabled creature corresponding with Neptune, whom, as we know, is related to Enki. This is stunning if we put it in the context of this book's narrative. It brings about yet a suggestion that this woman never named was thus the grandmother of the first Merovingian king. Historians are uncertain, but many of them agree that Glodio, a king of Belgium, was this woman's husband, who probably thought their offspring, Merovec, was his son when he was not. The records of Merovingian bloodline before the first king Cedric I are mostly lacking. And of course, this woman was not raped by a sea monster, but it is a typical mythical metaphor we see often in ancient texts and religious doctrines and beliefs. So let us say Isis tried to secure her own bloodline after she separated from Jesus, whom we now know and get a better understanding of, that was Marduk. Yeah. by letting the Catholic Church protect it, thinking it was Jesus' bloodline. Hundreds of years later, Marduk figured out what Isis had done and, of course, was extremely furious about that. He interfered, but as a matter of fact, it took Marduk at least several hundreds of years, which means that the plan of Isis could take place for several hundreds of years. So it has some positive effectiveness, and till the time that Marduk started to see and figure out what Isis had done. So he interfered, thus he impregnated Meroving's mother with his own DNA, and thus he re-established the Jesus Isis Ninurta Marduk bloodline. It is important to note that Enki's bloodline had by then completely erased. So Marduk raped her while taking on the role of Neptune Oannes, the Fisher King, another title for Jesus. Because this is very interesting, lovely brothers and sisters, that this whole theme of carpenter, fishing, fishies are very much represented in many ancient texts. Everywhere, no matter if you are reading Vedas or Buddhist or Hinduistic texts, the same things are coming back. Fisherman, carpenter, it all comes back. So the Fisher King, another title for Jesus, as we will detail in an upcoming session. Half fish, half human, also discussed in the West Penry papers. Ea, Prince Ea, was the later Akkadian name for Prince Enki, the god of the Sumerian city Eridu. If we want to have a deeper understanding, I would highly recommend you to go to the website baruchababhashemyahuwah.net and go to the webpage West Penry, scroll down till you find the free for download PDFs, and one of the PDFs is also a PDF from the Terra papers from Robert Morning Sky. Please download these and start reading this, because Robert Morning Sky also gives a lot of valuable information through these papers. There is still on YouTube a 30 years old video to find where you can see Robert Morning Sky giving a teaching for a group of people somewhere in the 1970s. So please go after this, and because he also speaks about Eridu. So Eridu is not only a city, it refers also to a place in the Orion universe. So Enki, the god of the Sumerian city Eridu, said to be first known a city on earth. Ea was also called the fish of heaven, and Oannes was half fish and half head, indicating that the Vatican is actually worshipping Prince Enki / Oannes as their real Jesus Christ. So this is in actuality the most confusing thing. So by going through all this information, I start to see how the overlords are making it for us so difficult to see the truth. And there are so many people whom have followed informational sources that in actuality were not really giving the information that they should have to know, the so-called false sources of information, so to say. So there are a lot of people who have certain ideas about this a half fish, a half man figure, and so on. Um, but in actuality, there is more to it. Sorry for the Dutch word. From this interference, Marduk and Isis indirectly gave birth to the father of the first Merovingian king, Childeric. So, the Merovingian king Childeric has the bloodline of Marduk and Isis in it. This means that the Merovingian dynasty is more of the bloodline Marduk Isis. Some even consider his father, Merovec, to be the first Merovingian king, except he was king of Belgium and not of Francia. Therefore, his son, Cedric I, is by most historians and genealogies deemed the first Merovingian king, the first king of the Franks. So the Holy Grail lineage changed from Isis Ninurta to Marduk Isis Ninurta even before the first king of Francia was born, the way it was supposed to be from Jesus and on, according to Marduk's plan. But because of the rape, the Jesus Magdalene bloodline was finally established. As I suggested earlier, I think it was never Isis' plan to put her Isis Ninurta bloodline in the royal houses. This could have been Marduk's idea after he raped Merovec's mother. It is possible he let Syrians incarnate into the Priory of Sion Brotherhood, convincing its members it was a good idea to hide the bloodline in plain sight within the royal houses. So we also are dealing with incarnated Syrians from the Syrian system. This way, Marduk could have a better control over the situation. Marduk is from the Syrian system. This is pure speculation, of course. It may also be that Isis had already planned to put her bloodline in kings and queens. We simply do not know. With the sea monster in mind, it is interesting that the child of the raped woman, who undoubtedly must have been Isis-Ninurta blood, was named Merovec, which means sea bull. Sea bull. The sea being a metaphor for Enki as Oannes, representing the main male bloodline, and the bull being Zeus, in Greek mythology representing both Enki and Marduk at different times, depending on the storyline that needed to be fulfilled. Zeus was or Marduk, yeah, and if he had to fulfill a certain storyline that was different than of Marduk, then he was all of a sudden Enki. So that is how they were playing with us. How the Merovingian bloodline was maintained. So Childeric the first died in 481, but it is uncertain when he was born. Historians have speculated back and forth, but it seems reasonable he was born around 438 or 440, between that time era. He married the Thuringian queen Basina, with whom he had a son Clovis, who became Clovis the First, the second king of the Merovingians. Wikipedia says Queen Basina was a runaway wife from the king of Thuringia, which seems to be another cover story. Who, in history, is the runaway queen who tries to escape Marduk, her, between quotation marks, husband? Well, this is Isis. So, this Queen Basina could have been the reincarnation of Isis herself. This is what Wikipedia has to say about this. During the reign of Childeric, the Frankish king married the runaway wife of the king of the Thuringians. And then Wes Penry has here in bold, but the story may be distorted. Gregory of Tours reported that Childeric the First was exiled from Roman Gaul for a period, and during that time he went to the kingdom of Thuringia. When he returned, Basina came with him, although she had been married to the king there, known as Bisinus. And then Wes Penry writes here in bold, she herself took the initiative to ask for the hand of Childeric I, king of the Franks, and married him. For as she herself said, I want to have the most powerful man in the world, even if I have to cross the ocean for him. All right, our history is full of hints, obviously. In addition to the runaway wife of a king, big clue right there, she also tells Childeric she only wants the most powerful man in the world. Even if she has to cross the ocean for him. Very interesting statement, since Thuringia was located on the European mainland, just like Francia, France. She crossed no ocean to see him, but someone crossed the ocean between brackets, or the sea, comma, rather, from the Middle East to Gaul, France, during the life of Jesus. This woman was Mary Magdalene. Therefore, I strongly suggest Queen Basina was Queen Isis incarnated. I also argue that as the queen of Thuringia, she also might have inserted the Jesus-Magdalene bloodline there, so the two monarchies could interbreed in the future to avoid too much incest. Isis also married Cedric to avoid too many offspring between siblings in the beginning of the Merovingian dynasty. Thus, Childeric the First and Isis incarnated as Basina, had children. Clovis was the eldest son, and he and his siblings remained of the bloodline. From there on, the Merovingian bloodline became self-propelled without too much interbreeding. So the kings could, for the most part, marry their cousins and members of other dynasties where the princesses were also of the true blood, so to say. If the Merovingian dynasty ever weakened, Isis could incarnate and be a breeder again. It appears that Isis was Marduk's prisoner and breeder. Again, perhaps being found and captured after the Neptune rape. And since then, she has been quite trapped. And she probably is trapped in the higher echelons of the astral realm. And the astral realm is not what people think it is. I believe Marduk keeps track of her incarnations and most likely even forces her to incarnate in certain bodies, and that she has little choice in that matter. They need her as much as they need us. Yeah, for Marduk and for Enki and their cohorts, minions, proxies, overlords, we are nothing more than just living batteries, giving them our life force energy. And so Isis is nothing more for them than just a breeder. This has been challenging section for the reader, I am sure, keeping track of all the names. So let's create a timeline to get a clearer overview. Here are the players on the Merovingian scene, their spouses and offspring, and the approximate time when they lived. So King Clodio of Belgium, wife of Clodio, unnamed, between brackets, the woman Marduk raped and impregnated. Clodio died around 435. Then we get Merovec, king of Belgium, the son of Clodio, although it is more likely Merovec was the son of Marduk, not of Clodio because of the rape. Then we get the unnamed wife of Merovec, probably a sister. There are no records of this woman. Then we have Childeric the first Merovingian king of the Franks, son of Merovec and his sister, which is all happening between 440 and 481. Then we have Queen Basina, former queen of Thuringia, wife of Childeric I, in the period of 438 and 477. She was probably an incarnation of Isis. And then as last we have Clovis I, the second Merovingian king, son of Cedric and Basina/Isis. There are many interesting things to say about the carefully protected Merovingian kings. As soon as they started their reign, they were forced not to cut their hair for the rest of their lives. If they did, they could no longer rule and would be dethroned and put in monasteries. Long hair was controversial at the time because the general population usually kept their hair short. Therefore, people around the world knew them as the long-haired kings. Our history does not convincingly explain why these kings had to keep their hair long. But it is explained in the West Penry papers that long hair, both in men and women, works as an antenna, so they can more easily connect with the metaphysical realm, such as the astral, but even with the Ka, i.e. the spirit universe, or Aryan, better known as Orion. Maria Orsic and the women of the Vril Society in the early mid-20th century knew this very well, and they used this technique to channel. We can therefore assume the Merovingians used their hair to better connect with the astral. Perhaps Marduk was in direct contact with many or all of them. So perhaps Marduk was in direct contact with many or all of them. Another peculiar thing about these kings is that most of them did not reign in the traditional manner. They just functioned as royal, between quotation marks, icons, i.e., they usually didn't do much. Instead, they handed over royal matters to their mayors, who were the second highest in rank with the Frankish court. So now we also get a side information about the real function of mayors and why these um, um, came to and how these came into existence. So the mayor, the original function, is not really being professed anymore by the mayors, but there is some, you can say, overlapping with what the original function was and the function of nowadays mayors have, I mean. So it was the mayors who held the true power. So this gives a deeper understanding and explanation again about the function of mayors. So what are the mayors of today doing? Moreover, and this was discussed in the West Penry papers, the second level of learning, and this second level of learning of the West Penry papers is now since recent in book form, so you can read this book yourself too. One of the Merovingian symbols was the bee, which is an Orion symbol, later also adopted by Napoleon and the Swedish monarchy. If you review the picture of Cedric I, you notice a symbol comprising a crown with 3 bees beneath the portrait. So these 3 bees, could that be the Queen of Orion, better known as the divine creatrix Sophia, then Khan and Lil, the king, the king that is in actuality related to the Sirius system, and then Ninurta, Prince Enlil. Charles Martel, Pepin the Short, and Charlemagne. So the Merovingian dynasty remained unbroken and protected for about 300 years, until 751, when King Cedric III was in power. In 718, Charles Martel, not a Merovingian, became the mayor of the Franks, and therefore the most powerful man in Francia. After the death of King Theuderic IV in 737, Martel, as the surrogate ruler, reigned without a king, and he was now the mayor of both the palace of Neustria in the west and Austrasia in the northeast, making him enormously powerful. It should be noted that during the time when the Merovingian dynasty was seated on the throne of Francia, their empire comprised a big part of the European continent, save England and Scandinavia. It was not because of the kings, but mainly because of the mayors who ruled behind the scenes. This can be loosely compared to today's United States of America, where the president has the power in the mind of the population, comma, but behind the scenes it is the vice president and the president's advisor who sit with the power, comma, at least in Pentagon. So now we see, that we need to see that this whole presidency and this figurehead that is placed on the forefront is not doing any decision by himself. He is nothing more than just a puppet that is obeying the vice president and the president's advisor. That's it. So we need to see this, and this also counts for countries led by prime ministers. It is the vice or prime minister, so to say, and someone else that is in actuality the leading hand behind the prime minister. And in this country, and especially in the countries that are still having royal houses, so monarchy, the monarchs are still having a huge say in the things. And in the Netherlands, the royal house is really pulling the strings. So this means that the prime minister, as well as the vice prime minister and the advisor, are in this country for the main time ruled by the royal Dutch monarchs. And this is something many people in the Netherlands do not want to understand. They still think that the prime minister is the one that is doing all the decisions. But behind the scenes, it is in actuality the royal house that is still doing this. And in the Netherlands, the royal house has set up a construct in the law which makes them invisible and being placed on the background. So they have pushed, in actuality, the prime minister and his or her cabinet on the forefront, but they did this only to make people falsely believe in this country that it is the prime minister and his or her cabinet that is doing the decisions. But in actuality, it is still the royal house who plays their plans and decisions out through the vice prime minister and its advisor. So here a little bit history of the Netherlands. When Charles Martel died in 741, his sons Carloman and Pepin the Short became co-mayors of the palace. However, there was a younger half-brother named Grifo, and their brother-in-law Odilo, Duke of Bavaria, who revolted over Carloman's and Pepin's positions and wanted a part of that power. This revolt probably played a role in their decision to put another Merovingian king on the throne, Cedric the son of either Chilperic II or Theuderic IV. Historians are uncertain in this. After a 6-year vacancy, a new king would add legitimacy to their reign. In those days, the kings were merely puppets. Eventually, Pepin the Short took the crown for himself. Pepin sent letters to Pope Zachary asking whether the title of king belonged to the one who had exercised the power or the one with the royal lineage. The Pope responded that the real power should be in the hands of a royal and thus should have the royal title as well. In 751, Childeric was dethroned and tonsured. His long hair was the symbol of his dynasty and thus of the royal powers he enjoyed. By cutting it, they divested him of all royal prerogatives. Once dethroned, he was confined to the Benedictine monastery of Saint-Bertin in Saint-Omer, while his son Theuderic was sent to the monastery of Saint-Wandrille. There are conflicting accounts of exactly when Childeric died, with some sources claiming as early as 753, while others state that his death occurred as late as 758. The above texts mentions Cedric III being tonsured. What does that mean? Well, if you look at a portrait of him, you see he had a very long hair in a proper Merovingian manner. Pepin dethroned him by forcing him to have his hair cut and his scalp shaved. Thus, he could no longer be king per Frankish law, and he was now confined to a life in a monastery. So he died young, as they often did, shortly after. Once again, the Frankish throne was vacant, and on July the 28th of the year 754, Pope Zachary anointed Pepin as his sons Charles and Carloman as kings of the Franks and patricians of the Romans. But the Pope's right to do so is doubtful. With Pepin being anointed, it was the end of the Merovingian dynasty, although the Merovingian bloodline still survived and was protected by the Priory of Sion, which had failed to safeguard both Isis' pure bloodline before Marduk intervened and the Merovingian dynasty. So this Priory of Sion did a lousy job, so to say. These things happen, of course, because in the seats of power there is always competition, and there are usually usurpers taking over eventually. Pepin became the first king of the Carolingian dynasty, of which the famous Charlemagne was a later king. The purpose of the orders, protecting the Isis-Ninurta bloodline today is still working on putting a new Merovingian line in power, primarily working through the Priory of Sion, the Order of Saint John, and the Rosicrucian order. Although Childeric III was the last Merovingian king, the bloodline survived on the female side, and the Carolingians taking over, said they would take Merovingian princesses as wives. This seems to have been the case on more than one occasion, since there are some hints about this. Charlemagne's maternal grandfather was named Charibert, a forename that also occurs in the Merovingian dynasty. Between brackets, two Merovingian kings were named Charibert. Yeah, it's Frankish, so Charibert. His mother, Bertrada, is speculated to have been the daughter of King Theodoric III, or Theodoric. His name is spelled in actuality both ways in the original sources, which would explain how her son came by his name. So Charlemagne also had an illegitimate son named Theodoric, another common Merovingian forename, as suggested by the possible parentage of Bertrada of Prüm. And of course, he gave his third son a name very similar to that of Clovis, Louis the Pious. Name is written Ludovicus in the original Latin sources. So Ludovicus is the same as Louis the Pious, which very similar to Chlodovechus, which is how Clovis' name is rendered. And we know that the name Louis is derived from the Old Frankish Lodovic. If he did not name him directly after that famous Merovingian or one of his descendants. Another possible argument in favor of a Merovingian connection is the fact that Charlemagne's fourth son was named Lothar, or Lothar, Lothar. So it is interesting, all this, because there are, if you look at society, for example, in Germany, there are many males named Lothar. So I think the dominant names in society, we should ask questions about these dominant names. And I think it would be a good idea to say for yourself, okay, these and these and these and these names are very dominant, and also in history, are the names that are often written about or revert to. And so then you can start making a journey and say, to whom are these dominant names related to? The bloodline Marduk Isis Ninurta, or the bloodline Enki Isis Ninurta, or bloodline Isis Ninurta. So then you can find out also in the nowadays population which people could be carriers of a certain DNA / bloodline. So this is interesting. So Charlemagne's fourth son was named Lothar, which name Louis gave his eldest son, which appeared in the Merovingians in the form of Lodar or Clothakar. Clothakar, that is it. So Chlothacar. So while we have no direct evidence, the transmission of these names into the Carolingian stock suggests a possible connection. All right. And it is also interesting to see that this in the Matrix trilogy movie epoch, I think it is in part 2, where they also are mentioning this Merovingian bloodline. So with this said, we can also now, with the background of this information, get another understanding of this whole Matrix trilogy epoch, and see what the storyline is that the overlords are presenting through the Matrix movies. It is not only telling us the storyline of our destiny that Marduk has in plan for us, and that is locking the human soul for definite up in technology. That is why Marduk as well as Enki have developed in the second Atlantis already, which took place in the time of Noah's flood. Before the flood came, Enki was already having this Atlantis, empire, so to say, imperium, and he was already working on the singularity. Marduk also wants to have each and every human soul in the singularity captured, but with different reasons. Both Enki as well as Marduk are on a war. They want to instigate a cosmic galactic war against the Orion universe. Enki wants to do this war and using the humans as cannon fodder and using the human avatar to ride into Orion universe and to start this battle, because Enki wants to sit on the Orion throne. He wants to, in actuality, kill off the queen, Kan Enlil, and Prince Enlil. Yeah, Marduk, in actuality, wants also the same, but he wants to get rid of Enki. And Marduk, also wants to sit on the Orion throne. But he does not have the idea to kill the creatrix, Queen Sophia, and Kan Enlil. He wants to only set them aside and be a ruler himself. So this is the main purpose behind the setup of metaverse and thus singularity. This is the plan both have in mind, and this will be our destiny. So you need to think very well. Do you want to participate again in a cosmic galactic war between your own star brothers? If not, then I would get your ass out of the singularity and metaverse. And this is possible. Ask your spirit how to do this, and you can do this. So leave this timeline behind you. This is also one of the main reasons that the Pleiadians, through Barbara Marciniak, were telling us that we should have our asses out of the singularity timeline, because in future, it seems, according to the Pleiadians who are still in connection with Barbara Marciniak, are saying through her that humans are in actuality having a very aggressive dominance in the Pleiadian system, especially the part of the Pleiadian system that was in early days a stronghold of Enki. So it is of great importance that we start to understand and also start to inform and educate ourselves of what is truly and really going on, and that everything that is happening in this world is only there to create constant chaos, so that we do not start this journey of self-educating ourselves and see the things for what they truly are. And I want to say to Wonder Bucket 1242, this is something you need to find out yourselves, yeah, go inform yourselves, dive deeper into this matter, I would say, and then you will see, yes or no. We all have, in a certain way, aspects of all of these bloodlines in us, as we can see nowadays with the whole migration host that is going on, which is deliberately done because they want to have as much as possible mixed bloodlines. Why? Because this makes the human weak. And it is through this weakness the overlords can possess human bodies. That is why. If you are indeed a carrier of one of the bloodlines, it is not something, so to say, to be proud of, because if you are from a pure bloodline, then you are also a target for easy possession of the body. So with this said, I have come to the end of reading this chapter 6 of this amazingly interesting book, The Story of Isis and the War on Bloodlines. I will also mention in the text box the links of the French and English royal lines, family trees, so then you can see it yourselves too. All right, thank you so much for tuning in through Rumble, through Facebook, through YouTube. Thank you for listening along. I wish you all a beautiful, joyful day filled with a lot of love, joy, wisdom, and truth, and real revelations coming from your own spirit and your own DNA. Your DNA can give revelations to you as well as your spirit, because your spirit is connected to your DNA. All right. Thank you so much again. See you next time, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, with chapter 7, which is all about the symbols of Mary Magdalene. And this is quite a short chapter, so I will do tomorrow chapter 7 and chapter 8. And chapter 8 is all about Pepin the Short and the Carolingian kings. So then you know that I will do 2 chapters at once. They're very short, each just 6 pages or something. Thank you so much again. And I close off with a little piece of music um, composed by Ben Sound, and it's called Inspiration. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time, or better said, tomorrow, with another live book reading.